Let's move quickly to dilution. I was able to accompany you to a couple of cities about a year ago, and you talked about the benefits of dilution, besides the fact that it can make you more comfortable and if you're a little sensitive to a more caustic oil. And that has really helped the way I've used it. You used the term wellness capacity. Can you explain what that is?
The body has a finite capacity for metabolism. Anytime we introduce anything into the body, it doesn't matter whether it's food or essential oils, it could be anything that we introduce to the body, it is going to need to be metabolized. This is a concept that helps you understand that the body has a finite capacity associated with it. And we always need to work within the limits of that capacity. And so what I might use as an essential oil, whether I use it diluted or I use it undiluted, how much I use really does become this individualized process. Something that to me might not be overwhelming at all, to you might be completely overwhelming. And so when we talk about wellness capacity or our body's ability to metabolize properly and fully, and when we talk about metabolism, Kirk, we should define that clearly. In a medical sense, we would define that to mean not how the body expends energy necessarily, but how the body creates energy, how the body cleanses itself, and how the body heals itself. And so it's important that we not only support those processes through good nutrition and through lifestyle, but when we're using the essential oils, that we're careful not to detract from those processes. And that's why I speak a lot to, when we're using the essential oils, about understanding your own capacity, understanding how your body reacts and responds, understanding what your needs are, and not so much worrying about what your neighbor's doing or what some other person has said that they felt like you ought to do. There is a little bit of a learning curve with the essential oils. I think there's some constants. The constant is that we know that there's great safety. I'll give you a good example. In doTERRA, one of the things that I have responsibility for is, of course, all the adverse events that occur with the essential oils. And I'm really pleased that in the last several months we've sold tens of millions of bottles of essential oils, and yet any type of an unwanted response, I don't even use the word adverse, I use unwanted response. That can be everything from, gee, I just didn't like the way this oil smelled after all, to it didn't produce the outcome I wanted and I'm really not sure that it helped me. It can be any of those and everything in between, and we're at 0.0072%. That's negligible. Right. So we know a constant with doTERRA essential oils has been the safety, and we also know a constant has been the efficacy or the benefits that people receive, the potency of the essential oils. I think the variable comes into our own individual capacity, and I think we can misjudge that from time to time. Don't doubt yourself would be my message. Don't doubt your own ability to understand how your body is reacting and responding. And so this concept that I've introduced is about teaching people how to learn to be in tune with what their body needs, but more specifically, how they are reacting and responding. If you feel or sense something different, chances are you're probably correct. And you should pay attention to that, and you'll always work well within those limits, is what I found. There is this optimal range of usage of essential oils. And while that range may fluctuate, it may be different for me and it may be different for you, and so it sometimes is difficult to tell, well, exactly how much should I use. I think this is on the coattails of that there's a proportional relationship with the benefits we receive and the amount of essential oil that we use. And so that initially I might use an amount of essential oil and the benefit I receive is proportional. But we know now from study and research of the essential oils that there's a crossover point where that relationship becomes a little bit disproportionate. And the more I use does not necessarily any longer mean the more benefit that I receive. And that as we cross over that threshold is what I mean by metabolic capacity. And as we cross over that threshold, now there's this opposite view that comes into effect, that the more I use does not necessarily mean the more benefit I'm going to receive. And in reality, I may use enough that no longer am I receiving benefit, or I am having some unwanted outcomes. So how do we determine where that optimal capacity is, right? What is the ideal amount for Kirk Jowers? What's the ideal amount for Dr. Hill? That's where we've got to use this individualism and our own experience. But there's ways that we can tell. It's
So
not
how
working
can
in
we
the
tell?
blind.
Because my wife has pointed out this chart to me when, I start going through an entire tube of past tense on my forehead, and she says, that is too much. You are definitely on the wrong side of Dr. Hill's chart right now.
Let's take past tense as an example. I might use past tense because I'm feeling a little irritated or I'm having some discomfort that has occurred. And so I can use a little bit, and if the discomfort, let's say, is persisting, I might need to use a little bit more. But there comes this point where, while I'm feeling good, and if your philosophy is like mine, sometimes if I'm feeling well, I feel like, well, then I could use more and I'll feel even better.
Right.
That may or may not be the case, and if we cross over that threshold, now we go from really feeling I felt well to now maybe I'm feeling a little bit irritated, I'm feeling a little bit agitated, and as I continue, then I might even start having some of those unwanted outcomes that I talked about earlier. So it's a threshold that we gauge not on a specific number, but a threshold that we gauge on my individual perception of how I'm feeling, depending on what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. So if it's more energy, I can use a little bit more, I feel energized, and I'm feeling really well, and I feel good, and I'm feeling like I've accomplished what I need to, but using more, once again, might begin to change some of those outcomes for me. Then I know I've crossed over that threshold. So it's going to be a variable that is a fairly constant thing, and while it sounds like it can become complex and difficult because, gosh, there's so many oils and there's so many ways to use the oils, in reality, it really isn't. There's this intuitive sense that comes with the oils, and I've really encouraged people to focus very heavily on that intuitive sense that they have. I just naturally, granted I've used oils for many years, but I just naturally reach for, and I need a little bit more, I need a little bit less, and I need it a little more often. I need to be diffusing an oil right now. Let their own experience be their guide, and I think people will find that not only can they use oils safely, but they can use oils in ways that they didn't think that they could or that they would before.